Okay, all right. So let's begin with a short meditation for 2 minutes so that we just center ourselves. And because we are going to dive really deep, so let's just try to gather ourselves and leave behind whatever is running in our mind and whatever we have gone through the day so that we are fully present in today's talk. So let's just close our eyes if you feel like, and let's just remain in silence and center ourselves. So let's set this intention to be fully present and no need to try to grasp everything. Let the wisdom come to you, let it come naturally to you, whatever clicks. And with that intention, we'll begin this. Okay. So I would like to begin first with setting the context that where we are in this space-time continuum and how did we get here. So it is the reality that we are living at present. If we look at our noosphere, which is about the buzzwords or what is running through our thoughts or media majorly, is massive imbalance around us. So climate change is the biggest problem. We are accelerating towards existential crisis. There's mental health crisis. Our ecosystem is collapsing. There's widespread social inequalities. So what we are seeing basically is massive imbalance. And how did we get here? So Lynn White, who is an author of The Roots of Our Ecological Crisis, traces the roots of it to the book of Genesis. So she mentioned that in the book of Genesis, it was written that man is to conquer over nature, or man is separate from nature. And in 14th century, if we look at the history of 700 years of history, so in 14th century, it started from Europe, where some men who misinterpreted the book of Genesis, and they thought that it is their mandate to go out and colonize the world, to conquer. So what they thought about the indigenous population all around the world was that they are savage and they're not civilized, and they took it as a mandate to civilize them, and that is how the colonial history began. And in what happened in 14th century was also that the age of discovery and the age of enlightenment came through. So what is this age of discovery and age of enlightenment? So until 14th century, communities living in different parts of the world had their own culture, they had their own knowledge system, they had their own economic system, they had their own ways of being, they had their own beliefs. But um, due to colonization and with the advent of age of discovery, the scientists declared that everything that which cannot be proven empirically is mumbo jumbo, right? So they declared all the wisdom that was accumulated in different parts of the world as mumbo jumbo, and they discarded it and they began their journey from scratch. So science began its journey from 14th century. The modern science that we know of began its journey in 14th century, which is 700 years ago, from scratch. And it started from this belief from the book of Genesis that we are to conquer over nature. We are above nature and we are separate from nature. And they took this mandate to all across the world. So even the countries that were not colonized, for example, say for example, Bhutan was never colonized in its history, and it was never conquered. But still, Bhutan faces the effects of colonization because our education system is based on the science, the modern science, which came through the age of enlightenment and the age of discovery. And even our economic system as we know today comes from this philosophy or this root that man is separate from nature. So it is designed from this understanding, basically. So that's the 700 years of history, and that is how we arrived here. Because when we thought of ourselves as separate from nature, we designed everything to be like that. And because many countries were colonized and even democracy somehow emerged in all parts of the world through the transference of through the independence of the colonized nations, or we have uniform systems all across the world today. All the communities are just following one uniform system which emerged from this misinterpretation of the book of Genesis. So what this led to basically is that colonization and whatever development happened after that promised us progress, right? If we look at whenever we talk about whether industrialization has improved our lives or development has helped us, so we always look at statistics, and statistics tells us that um, our life expectancy has increased, right? There has been better healthcare facilities and all that. But if we really look at the data, we do not have recorded data before 18th century. If we go to Wikipedia, there's no recorded data before 18th century. So we do not have like life expectancy data before 18th century. So it may be possible that in many different pockets or many different parts of the world, communities might be living in better health conditions, but it's just that we have not measured it. So it is inappropriate to say that development has really helped us to progress, because right now what we are seeing is that it has led us to an existential crisis where our future is in danger. So why this development model failed is because number one, it misdefined development. Number two, it misunderstood the truth, and number three, it ignored the self. So we'll now look at how this happened. Okay, so when we talk about it misdefined development, so as we know that the whole focus today of all the nations which are organized in, our civilization is organized into nation states, and the major goal of all the nation states is the pursuit of GDP, right? Which is to increase the size of the economy. So what we focus on, our focus has been on the health of the economy and career. So for example, right now the focus of India is to become the third largest economy in the world as a nation state. Okay, Bhutan prioritizes happiness, but it's still aiming for increase in GDP, because that's how the whole system and their philosophy is geared towards. So we have been focusing on health of economy and career as the civilization, but what we have ignored in the process is our environmental health, our physical health, our emotional health, our social health, our mental health, and our spiritual health. So economic wisdom has overpowered all these other forms of wisdom, which is has been set aside. So this has led to an imbalanced lifestyle, which has jeopardized omni well-being, which in Indian philosophy the term is Sarva Mangalam, which means for the well-being of all, starting from the self, society, and nature, and well-being in all the seven spheres of life. Okay. And what this the colonization, when we think of ourselves as separate from self, is this has been the root cause of all the crises that we are witnessing. So what appears as climate change or biodiversity loss, wars, social inequality, community breakdown, anxiety, disease, depression, these are all just the tip of the iceberg. But when we look deeper, we'll find that the root cause emerges from illusion of separation. That was a misinterpretation of the book of Genesis, that we are separate from nature, which leads to lack of reverence for nature, which leads to ineffective economic and educational system, which has led to today climate change and biodiversity loss. Separate from society. So the modern economic theory was founded on this notion that humans are greedy and they're here to maximize their self-interest, which makes us feel that we are separate from society, that we are independent, that um, um, this whole idea of neoliberalism, so which leads to lack of empathy and cooperation, because we are made to compete with each other, which leads to this mindset of scarcity, which means that we have to grab from others share to be able to survive, which leads to inappropriate social structures, which is like social technologies like our banking structure, our corporate infrastructure, which all leads to what we see appears as, wars, social inequality, community breakdown. And the last is the illusion of separation of self from our own higher self. Okay, so um, there are these innate values within us, but the way the societal structures are designed, a lot of times there's this ethical conflict that we are constantly dealing with. So it leads to lack of virtues, values, and self-realization, conflicting paradigms and behavior, which appears as anxiety, depression, and diseases. Okay. So if we look at the root cause of all of it is an illusion of separation of self from nature, from society, and from higher self, which emerged in the 14th century because this was not common all across the world. Many communities in the world realized that we are not separate from nature, we are not separate from society, and we are not separate from our higher self. Okay, so the effect of this today is that we have created hell not just outside but within, and this is how majority of our world today looks like. That we have created havoc for all life forms on Earth. Right, we are going through the phase of sixth mass extinction. So this brings me to the biggest challenge of our time, that how do we transition from our trajectory right now towards well-being to well-being? How do we turn our trajectory from well-being to well-being? Because we are accelerating towards it, because every developing country in Southeast Asia is accelerating towards this old development model to increase the economy, which is increasing or penetrating deeply more this widespread illusion of separation. So we need to begin by understanding first the reality, that what is the reality of our existence, what are some of the fundamental truths within which we exist. So this brings me to the reality of zero, or the reality of what we call in India as shunya. What this reality is about is that we exist in a unified conscious field wherein there exists infinite possibilities. There is nothing that is given. It is a field of infinite possibilities. And within this field of infinite possibilities, there is nothing that has come to existence yet, right? Everything emerges from, as today scientists are talking about, dark energy, that 98% or 99% of our existence consists of dark energy. So there's this field of infinite possibilities. And within that infinite possibility, field of infinite possibilities, we are individuals. And our reality, and as individuals, we are experiencer of our reality. And we are the agents of action, right? We are the agents who are taking choices. So what shapes this field, or what shapes this reality, is our choices at each moment, right? If I decide today, if PM Modi, for example, decides today that India should become the third largest economy in the world, that is completely shaping our collective reality. It is not shaping just the reality of in India, but or Indians, but it is shaping the reality for the whole world. Similarly, even our individual actions at every moment is shaping the reality. For example, if I smoke, and if I uh, throw my cigarette butt maybe onto the soil, that is creating an impact, which is not just impacting me, it is also impacting the soil out of which the crop would grow, which out of which, somebody would consume it. So it is a ripple effect that affects it. So at the center of this field is individuals, and as individuals, we hold the power to shape our reality through our choices, right? I hope everybody is able to follow me till now. Yeah. And how these choices manifest. So there's this feminine, there's masculine, there's maths, there's art, there is always logi, there's nomi, right? And it whatever choices we make, it is somehow a combination of these two, which is duality even of our mind, right brain and left brain. Sometimes the left brain overpowers, sometimes the right brain overpowers. And whenever there is this harmony between the two, like for example the work of Mozart or Picasso or Leonardo, it makes it very widely and deeply touching. And even the nature is a combination of maths and arts, if we have to see, right? If we look deeper, then it's nothing but maths and arts. So our choices manifest through our duality of our mind, and our existence is bounded by self, society, and nature. So we can't exist, the society cannot exist independent of self, self cannot exist independent of nature, and these three are all interconnected and interdependent. So right now, if we see, the problem emerges because we are overemphasizing the self, and we think that we are disconnected with the society. We think that we are disconnected with the nature. So we are not in harmony either with society or with nature, and that is why there's a widespread imbalance, right? And neither there is harmony or balance between right brain and left brain. So just recently there was this talk at Oxford University between the professors of psychology, and they were talking about that how majority of the humans are just left brain dominant, that they are just entangled into logical thinking, whereas they are not exercising their right brain so much because, again, of lack of education, because their education doesn't focuses so much on enhancing the right brain. So the majority of the humans today are working just from their left brain, which is again causing, all our choices are causing imbalance. Okay. So, goal of all development. So, when we looked at earlier that why the old development model has failed is because it misdefined development, because it defined development just as a GDP number, or a particular income standard. So, for example, UN defines categorizes all the nations into least developed countries, developing countries, and developed countries. So, for example, Bhutan just graduated last year from being least developed country to developing country. And how was this categorization made? Was basically just on income standard, right? So we are defining development as income standard, but in reality, the goal of all development, if we see our aspiration, is all choices that we make is that we want to avoid suffering, right? None of us here in this room wants to suffer. So the goal of development is not to reach to a particular income standard. That's just a mean to an end of avoiding suffering, right? But we have misdefined it, right? So goal of all development and progress is avoidance of suffering, and joy emerges when there is beauty, wisdom, and harmony, and suffering emerges when there is otherwise. So if we look at this diagram again, okay, so these are the values that holds self, society, and nature in balance and in harmony, which is beauty, wisdom, and harmony. But when we ignore these values, right, that's when the imbalance occurs and the suffering occurs. Okay. So, so far, if we see all our actions and all our choices, we have made a lot of technological progress. We are the most comfortable society so far in the history of this world. We have all the conveniences in the world, but still we have created more suffering rather than creating more joy in the world. WHO is predicting that mental health crisis is going to be the next pandemic. UK just released a report that how their young generation, they classified it as lost generation because majority of the young people in UK are suffering from mental depression. Right. So we have come very far in terms of technological progress, but still we have not been able to elevate suffering. And the question that I ask is the why? Why we have not been able to do that? Why, as most intelligent species on Earth, our choices are creating more suffering? Right? Why are we making decisions which are, sorry to use this word, but which are dumb? So, for example, I was in this village in Ladakh, and I came across this joke that as humans, we are the only species that live on land but deposits our waste into water. None of the species who live on land shits in water, right? We are the only species who does that. And no wonder because of that, our soils are depleting today and our waters are polluted. But why, as humans, we are making such unintelligent choices? So this brings me to this question that are we really mindful of our choices? And what are the factors that are influencing our choices? Because it is all about that. Our existence is shaped by our choices. So it is really important to look at that. What are the factors in our day-to-day lives that shapes our choices as individuals and as society as well? So when I introspected on this question, deeply, it brought me to this 5 factors of influence that shapes human life and civilization on Earth. Number one is our cosmological belief, or you can call it religion or faith. Okay, so we just saw the root of our, ecological crisis, that how it emerged from a cosmological belief that we are separate from nature, we are separate from society, and we are here as greedy individual to maximize our self-interest. Number two is our self-awareness or consciousness, that how self-realized we are. How much do we understand the nature of our mind? How much we understand about our own life? How much we understand about our existence in terms of all the 7 spheres of life, from our relationship to our environment, from our relationship to our body, our emotions, with our occupation, society, intellectually and spiritually, how self aware we are. Then third is the body of knowledge, that is our understanding of how the systems or the ecosystem of Earth works, and our skills to apply that wisdom, that is art or technology. Okay. Number four is the trade and commerce, the rules of trade and commerce, right? Because whatever the rules of trade and commerce are, it governs our choices on day-to-day basis. It governs our actions, it governs our behavior. And number five is the governance, that what are the rules and laws that we set for the society. Okay. So now we'll look at all these five factors individually and how they have contributed, or how our misunderstanding of these five factors or the influences that they have had on our choices have contributed to the crisis which we are facing right now. So the as per Indian philosophy, and I find it pretty true when I even I compare it and I look at my own life, that the fulfillment of human life on earth comes from dharma, which is performing our duty, not just towards our family but towards the world as well, through artha, which is accumulating enough material wealth to be able to perform our duty and enjoy pleasures and desires as well, and spiritual liberation. Okay, and all these five factors play a role uh, in fostering this, in fostering the fulfillment of life. So faith and cosmology guides us in our dharma or duty, which is our responsibilities. Natural, physical, social sciences combined with trade and commerce helps us to acquire enough wealth and pleasures. Governance ensures security and well being, and Anvikshki, which is self awareness, forms the basis of our perception through which we see the world. Our consciousness forms the basis of our perception, right? So far, these five domains have existed in isolation. Okay, even when we are pursuing these bodies of knowledge, we are pursuing them largely in isolated manner, and these are growing independently without considering that they are all interconnected in shaping our life. So for example, the field of economics is progressing without linking the dots to cosmology or consciousness or governance or the how our knowledge infrastructure is organized, right? So far we have been looking at this from a very siloed perspective, but whereas they are all interconnected in shaping our life on earth. So the problem is that not only do they lack harmony amongst each other, they're not harmonized amongst each other, but there is conflicting perceptions even within these fields. So we do not have consensus on economic theories, we do not have consensus on cosmological theories, we do not have consensus on consciousness theories, and because of that we all are on different page, right? And when we all are on different page, it is very natural for conflicts to arise, right? So let's look at the how these five factors have been influencing our choices. So the intended role of knowing the cosmological truth or about religion and faith is that it 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 works as an inner compass, right? So what happened in this process of colonization was that religion and faith was replaced by science. Whatever could be proved empirically was only believed, and rest everything was discarded as mumbo jumbo. But the catch here is that something which is beyond our existence on earth cannot be proven in labs, cannot be proven empirically. It can only be experienced, it can only be experienced through awareness. But that experiential understanding which many indigenous communities held before was discarded, and we were never trained to find cosmological truths through those experiential awareness, rather but through empirical means, that is whatever can be proven in lab. So this led to a disconnect, and moreover what happened was that because of this classical science was based on mechanistic approach, that is separation of man and nature, whereas today the quantum science has come to this conclusion, which was believed in exil period also, which is found in Buddhism, which is found in Hinduism, that we are all interconnected and interdependent, and we exist in a unified conscious field, right? Our choices are affecting everybody. But the problem with this today is that this understanding or this transition of science that has happened has not been translated at the grassroots level. So majority of the humans today are trained in 18th century science. Even our textbooks today in India and Bhutan continue to be based on 18th century science, whereas quantum science has advanced, or 21st century has advanced to quantum science, but majority of the people do not know about it. So we do not know about the invisible vibratory matrix that shapes our consciousness. So for example, have you ever felt when you walk into a temple or a church or a monastery, you suddenly feel a sense of calm? Has that ever happened to you? But you do not have a scientific explanation to it. Most probably, you won't have a scientific explanation to it if you have not read quantum science, right? So quantum science today talks about this vibratory matrix, which indigenous communities knew very well about, right? So, for example, that is why in Buddhism they would practice all these prayers, because our existence is shaped by sound. Everything is vibration. Prayers, when we chant certain mantras, it shapes the vibratory matrix of the space. It is not visible, but it can be felt. But we discarded all that as mumbo jumbo. So today, if we look even at our architecture, okay, or architectural design, we are not considering how the spaces that we are designing is shaping the vibratory matrix. We are totally blind towards it, right? And that has consequences on how, on what frequencies we are vibrating, right? And no wonder that then that we are facing, there's so much widespread mental depression, because it is lowering us to the frequencies of fear, the systems as well, the social structures as well, to the frequencies of fear, to the frequencies of greed, to the frequencies of jealousies, to the frequency of having unlimited desires and always wanting to, from one pleasure to next pleasure, right? So this has been the result of the fault in our cosmological belief and how they influence our choices. So how many people do you think in the world right now who are going to make their next house are considering this? Very few. Okay, so second factor was about the knowledge infrastructure of the world. So let me go back again to history. So before colonization and before globalization, all the individual communities existing in different parts of the world had their own knowledge system. They knew their ecology very well. They knew their bioregion very well. They had their wisdom accumulated, which was passed on from one generation to another generation, right? But what globalization did was that it led to a uniform knowledge infrastructure. Today, we do not have place-based knowledge infrastructure, right? We do not have place-based databases. All the databases, most of the databases that we have in the world are either aggregated at the national level or are either aggregated at the global level. If I want to zoom in and see for a village, I wouldn't find the database. I wouldn't find the knowledge, place-based knowledge of that village. And second, it is very poorly organized. So, for example, if I want to go on Google and if I want to see that how far our economic thinking has progressed, even what I'm talking about right now, I am not sure if this has been discovered before or if anybody has written about it before. And I have no way of finding it out because we do not have an organized knowledge infrastructure in the world where we can go and see the timeline of the evolution of our thinking that has happened, right? So instead of structuring knowledge in a comprehensible manner, what colonization and all the development that happened in this past 700 years was that it led to generalizations and standardizations. And Another most important shift that happened was that earlier wisdom was imparted to lead a fulfilling life, so that when children are growing up, they become better individuals, they become um, valuable individuals to the society who can lead a fulfilling life. The focus was not on making them ready for market or making them ready for jobs. The focus was on training more on the fulfillment of life. But if we look at our education system today, it is largely geared towards making us ready or just imparting skills that can so that we can contribute to the economy and we can get jobs, right? Are we taught in our universities and our schools that how our body functions and what is good for us and what is not good for us? What should we be eating and what should not be eating, right? Are the management individuals taught about values and wisdom, right? They are taught about marketing strategies, about competition, about subliminal marketing strategies, right? That how you can manipulate the minds of consumers, right? So just because so that we can become market ready. Okay. Similarly, if we look at the third domain, which is the rules of trade and commerce, so the original or the intended role of the rules of trade and commerce or economics is about allocation of enough resources so that everybody in this world can find well-being. Optimal allocation of resources, that is what the definition of economics as a field of science is, which is optimal allocation of resources for the well-being of all. But we all know that today, more than 60% of the wealth is owned by just 1% at the top, right? So it's not a fair allocation. Economics has not been able to fulfill its purpose so far, right? And instead of making provision for enough resources so that everybody can find fulfillment of life, it is rather leading individuals towards greed and hunger, which has no end, which knows no end. So, for example, even in US, when everybody has enough to lead a comfortable life, but still the leadership of US wants the US economy to continue to grow. They do not want to come to steady state economy, right? And in our day-to-day choices as well, economic wisdom is the wisdom that is dominating it, right? Even economic wisdom dominates our knowledge infrastructure and our education system also, because only those researchers are funded today which can find, which can generate some income in the market. But researchers which cannot generate income in the market do not find funding. Majority of the courses that find funding is coming from big companies who can then hire those students, right? So it's no more about pursuing wisdom for the sake of fulfillment of life, but it's more about pursuing wisdom for the economy. And that's largely also because how our rules are designed of the economy. Okay, so coming to the fourth factor now, which is governance. So ideally, in many societies, there's always has been a search for, if we look historically, there always has been a search for philosophical king. Okay, so because the philosophical king knows what is right and wrong and can lead its subjects towards their fulfillment of life. But today, our governance is not led by philosopher kings or is not led by people who are wise, but people who can somehow find their way to the top or attain to the political power. And we all know how that happens. And again, it is linked to the economy as well. So leadership is also guided by our understanding of the cosmology, the education that person has, whoever is leading, and also whatever the economic rules are, because majority of the funding for the elections comes from corporates. So majority of the governments in the world are controlled by corporates today. Even if we look at India, that's what is happening. Why PM Modi in the election is um, promising for the third largest economy is because that would help the corporates, even when the youth wants the otherwise, right? But their hands are tied. So the role of governance shifted from ensuring security and well-being to amassing power and to just increase the economy as far as they can. Okay, and lastly, this is the most important, or out of the all the five domains, is our consciousness or our level of self-realization. So the very important point that I want to make here is that in many indigenous communities before, and in many different forms of knowledge bodies, for example, in Buddhism or in Hinduism, a lot of focus was given on first cultivation of mind rather than application of mind. Okay. So today, if we look at our education system, there's very little focus that is given on cultivation of mind. Largely, the focus is on application of mind, because of which most of the individuals, majority of the individuals in the world are not self-realized. We do not know the questions like who am I, where we come from, what are we here for, scares us. It scares many people, and many people do not even get a chance to ponder on these questions because they are so tied up in the economic race from hand to mouth that they never become self-realized. And there's no education right now, apart from in monasteries and in temples, that focus on this fact, that focuses on cultivation of mind. And this population is dwindling. How many of us are going to monasteries and temples for education or gurukuls for education? Not even 1% now of the world's population. So 99% of the people are not self realized. And the catch here is that the father of modern economics, Adam Smith, okay, on whose theory our whole industrialization and economic system is designed, he said that humans tend to maximize their self-interest, and they can maximize their self-interest only when they're self-realized. Because we do not, if we are not self-realized, we would not know where our self-interest lies, right? We can only know where our self-interest is when we know when we are self-realized. So he advocated for self-realization, but his successors focused only just on few lines from his book that humans are to maximize self-interest, and they took self-interest for profit. They just assume that by self-interest, what we mean is what Adam Smith meant was profit, whereas he didn't mean that. For him, self interest was a broader term wherein humans realize that their self interest lies in the interest of the society, it lies in the interest of keeping our ecosystem in a healthy state. And for that, he emphasized on self realization. The only difference between him and Indian philosopher or Indian sages is that even Indian sages said that even Kautilya, who was the Indian economist who wrote Earth-Shastra, said it that humans have to be self-realized. But Indian sages also gave the method of self-realization. Even Buddhism gives the method of self-realization. Eight limbs of yoga is about self-realization. So this Oxford psychologists in their talk, when they were talking about self-realization and when they were talking about balancing left brain and right brain. So when we talk about self-realization, we generally think of meditation, that we all need to meditate. Okay. But that's not all. These professors now today realize that it takes ecology of practices to become self-realized. It's not just about meditation, but they don't know what this ecology of practices is about. But if we go back to indigenous wisdom founded in China, India, Bhutan, Japan, we would see that they had these ecology of practices in place. For example, 8 limbs of yoga or eightfold path of Buddha. These are nothing but the ecology of practices that can lead one to self realization. But this domain is completely non existent today. It shapes our choices every day, but our focus is not there. It doesn't, it has not deserved so far the emphasis that it deserves it to be. So, only when these 5 factors, when are oriented towards its real purpose for enabling the fulfillment of life, we can elevate the suffering from the world. But if these 5 factors are not geared towards it, then we would go on to create more suffering because our choices would be misinformed. So, what we need is to integrate all these bodies of knowledge. There's already a lot that is existing out there, but it's just that we have not weaved them together into a comprehensive whole. We have not started to look at them as a comprehensive whole, as one subject rather than as 5 individual subjects. So, with this weaving together now, we need to design for a new way of life. Because so far, whatever we have designed has come from a misunderstanding and has come from a misinformed approach. So, why design is so important is that it is what it is. Design is what defines progress, right? If we can design better, we can elevate suffering. If we can design better, we can create more progress, right? So Steve Jobs said that good design is not how it feels or looks, but how it works. But the next question that I would like to add to Steve Jobs' quote is that work towards what? What is the larger goal that all our design is working towards? What as humans are we really aspiring for? So if we ask this question, say in a high school, majority of the children would say that I aspire to become pilot, I aspire to become maybe doctor, engineer, but nobody says that I aspire to become a fulfilled individual. So this brings me to so what how when from this understanding, how can we design for a new way of life? So this brings me to the eightfold path to transformation, where we need to take moving forward. We need to take an integral design approach with the focus on this fact that when we are designing for states of being. So what we design starts designing us back. This is an ontological fact that whatever we design starts designing us back. So, for example, whoever designed the chair that I'm sitting on is designing my posture, is defining my posture. Whoever designed this house is designing how what physical movements I have when I wake up, when I go back to sleep, when I use the kitchen and everything, right? If we're designing cities, we are designing a certain state of being for people in the city. So for example, if I don't know if any of you have visited Angkor in Cambodia. So if you see Angkor, that whole space is designed just for fulfillment of life. The way the Angkor city is designed was for fulfillment of life. Every structure there, every rules and norms, if we read about Angkor society, was designed for fulfillment of life. So this has been a proven fact now by Joseph Stiglitz that humans are not greedy by nature. It is the environment and the culture that shapes us. If we are in a different culture, if our social structure is different, we'll be behaving different, right? So with this facts in mind, we need to design for a new way of life, starting with leadership and integral self transformation. Why integral self transformation is because majority of us are living in an old paradigm, are living in a knowledge system which is misinformed. So we need to transform ourselves integrally. We need to cultivate our minds. We need to uh, become self realized. So that has to happen for the majority of the people in the world. Number two is with that, number two is about social design, that how we design our society, what are the rules and norms that we design. Economic design, okay, social design is shifting away from the fact that our happiness can, we can be individually happy without society being, you know, unhappy. We do not live in our own bubbles. We can try to do that, but ultimately the bubbles burst basically. Economic design, ecological design, education, and leadership and thinking. So these are the domains in which the transformation is needed, and also integral design thinking is needed. And these are all interconnected and interdependent. And when we do that, we'll find that we'll tick off maximum of the SDGs. Now, many of the sub fields of design domains falls under, these are just the broad categories. And if, for example, if we go deep into ecological design, then we'll find mobility there. If we go deep into social design, we'll find industrial design there. If we go deep into economic design, then we'll find, livelihood and other things there. So these are just broad categories. I don't want to go deep into each of these categories, but after this talk, I can share a reading material which talks deeply about each of these eight domains. Okay. So to just sum up, so our reality is about infinite possibilities, and we live in a unified field of consciousness. Okay. And from there, the existence comes through our desire, through our individuals, through an experiencer. Experience is shaped by the duality of our mind. We are bounded with self, society, and nature. Our choices are influenced by five elements. And to transform, we need an integral approach that takes an omni perspective and the eightfold path where design defines progress. So, with that, I would like to open the floor for any questions and any thoughts or perspectives anybody would like to share.
Yeah, I would first like to say it was nice journey, I would say, throughout. Also, we had Sakumi joining us in between the talk. She is another transdisciplinary practitioner from Japan. And I think while you were talking, we usually have similar discussions about like how the educational systems across the world have been functioning.
Thank you for your wonderful presentation. Sorry, I just jumped into in the middle. But yes, as Jyoti said, for my thesis, I've been kind of researching Zen philosophy, which originates from Buddhism. And I found a lot of, how can I say, similarities or the same connections with what you presented today. Like, uh, how can I say this? Mm, in this society, we often, how can I say, get distracted with worldly things, which is happening outside somewhere, but we often maybe need to focus on who we are, the true self, which always inside within us. And I think in that sense, I also somehow can feel, believe each of us has a higher selves, or maybe we can translate it into like a unique quality within us, within each of us. So also what you said, I have no Mm, the cultivation of mind rather than application of mind. I thought this is very, very beautiful word language. So thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, I really enjoyed, I think, just the talk in general, and thinking about like the spirituality, and then I think also a large part of that is like creativity that has been, you know, depressed, compressed, and a lot of like our education as well. I think especially coming from America, like I feel like our education is really like it teaches you how to be a cog in this like machine. And so even in like the 8 months that I've spent part of this program, like realizing that there's so much more outside of that, because I used to be a consultant as well. And so moving into like the arts and sort of looking into like these different aspects. But I really enjoyed sort of like the Buddhist philosophy perspective and terminology from this also. And I'm excited to sort of explore it further. So thank you.
Also, I have one question, Sneha. What is this project in Bhutan? What is it about? What are you working currently?
Yeah. So with this thinking now, we are trying to transform the society by through one village at a time. So we are piloting this concept where we are really changing the development paradigm from just GDP growth to fulfillment of life in all the seven spheres. And we are doing that through taking this eightfold ecosystems approach. So whenever we are going to any village, we are doing baseline assessment where they are in these eight domains right now, and ideally with community consultation and with their views, with giving them also exposure and leading to self transformation, how they can themselves attain to fulfillment of life. So that's the project that we are working in Bhutan also right now with Bhutanese government and a local foundation here. We are working in Malaysia as well with Malaysian government and a local foundation there. And apart from these, we are also orchestrating some moves at policy level. So, for example, to introduce or to give enough emphasis to cultivation of mind in our education system rather than just application of mind. That's number one. Number two, to shift our economic rules and our social technology. So we have made a lot of progress in physical technology, but we have been lagging behind in social technologies. And when I talk about social technologies, it's about our banking infrastructure. So right now, our central banks are printing money without any basis. So we have overconsumed, we have consumed from the future generation as well. And that has happened because there has been no checks and balances. So there's another TED talk that I have on One Earth balance sheet, which talks about how our economic system needs to be redesigned. So that talks about completely changing the rules of the economic system. So we are pushing that at the policy level in India and in Malaysia and in Bhutan, where we are leading to compilation of national balance sheets, and based on that, the corporate infrastructure and another infrastructure. In Bhutan, then we are also working on the building codes, on revising the building codes for the nation so that the architecture takes into consideration not just sustainability, but also, as I mentioned, the invisible vibratory matrix, which now the quantum science talks about. So these are some of the projects that we have in places which is coming out of this thinking right now.
Thanks, Sneha. I was just curious, how is this being implemented, and how do you? One more question, how are the impacts measured? How do you know it's working?
So for that, we are also in the process of devising impact measurement, sort of like a tool, which measures impact or progress in all the seven spheres of life. Okay, so right now, most of the indexes that we have, GDP just measures economic progress, right? And that too in a faulty manner. Okay, and then we have happiness index, but it again went through our review. It was not comprehensive enough. So we have taken seven spheres of life, or seven spheres of well-being as the basis of the index, where we look at the impact in the environmental sphere, in our physical health sphere, in our emotional health, occupational health, social health, intellectual health, and spiritual health. So, on the basis of that, we are in the process of devising an index, and none of our projects, all our projects are in infancy right now, if I can say, are infants. So we have not reached to that stage where we'll be able to measure impacts. Maybe after 2 to 3 years in the villages that we are working, we'll be able to do an impact assessment. But right now, they're going through this process of change. So we are not in on that stage where we can measure impact right now.
Yeah, it's a great perspective. Like it could act as a design tool for us also. Like it would be great if you could share the material you were saying.
Yeah.
Because we always, the thing about transdisciplinary approach is we are also in this, I would say, the omni world where everything can be right and nothing is wrong at the same time. So how do we go ahead with such complexities when we are dealing with? So frameworks like this would actually guide us. Okay.
Yeah.
We
So
create it.
yeah, so we generally understand our reality to be very complex, right? This is now the buzzword, right? That it's a very complex system. But there is a very simple truth in this complex system is that we are all interconnected and interdependent. And we cannot know everything because each moment is changing the reality. At each moment, our choices are changing the reality, and we can never comprehend it. So that is why, for example, Chinese philosophy talks about Tao, right? That just flow, and there's this Tao that will work, right? Is that you cannot know everything, leave it to the Tao, right? So we have to understand the simple truth, and when we understand the simple truth that we cannot know everything, is then when we know everything.
Anyone else would like to trouble Sneha or express it?
Um, yeah, I wanted to like just a question because I feel like sometimes when I in my mind when I think about all of this, I find it hard somehow to understand how to like enhance or like mm, initiate, let's say, a mental shift inside the society that I was born in and I grew up in. So I was a bit curious in for example, the example that you brought forward, the one in Bhutan, if it's something that it's happening because there were already the willness of the population living there and the one in charge saying, okay, we want to invest in this, or if it was more like a shift that they made at a certain point in order to like understand if a shift could be made somehow also like in the other part of the world, which is where I was born and raised, which is completely different cultural wise and society wise. So I don't know if I explained like what is my question now within this topic.
Mm.
Like if it's possible to um, enhance somehow or initiate this kind of mental change in order to give meaning also to other things that were completely not cared for our entire history, I can say, probably.
Yeah, I understand what you're trying to say. So I'll describe how this shift happened for me, how I got integrally transformed. Was in 2020, I was locked down in Bhutan for 8 months. I came here for a project, but then India announced lockdown, and then Bhutan announced lockdown, and there was closure of borders, and I couldn't go back. So I was locked down here for 8 months, and otherwise, I had spent most of my life in my city in India and traveling to many different parts of the world as well. But My experience in Bhutan, how it shaped me was that when I would step out of my house, I wouldn't see any billboards. All I would see is symbols that would define higher values. For example, a symbol of four friends, which symbolizes unity and cooperation amongst each other. Then eight lucky symbols. Then symbols of dharma. So there are no billboards in Bhutan, and what I realized during those 8 months is that it has changed my spending habits. I no longer want to purchase something, or it was changing my behavior. The whole environment was changing my behavior. Even the air that I was breathing, because it's the only carbon negative country, the water that I was drinking. So the design of this environment, the design of Bhutan had a huge impact on myself. So this same can be happen in other countries also. There's two ways of doing it. Either it can come through inner reflection, where people spend more time, or maybe the education is designed in such a manner that it gives more space for inner reflection. And the second method of doing it is that we create such environments, we design such environments that fosters this. So through designing environments, it can foster it. Now Bhutan has a very unique case study. So if there's time, I can talk more about it. So Bhutan was never colonized, as I mentioned, right? And it prioritized gross national happiness since 1974. It was the first nation to prioritize gross national happiness over GDP, but it has not been able to realize gross national happiness, although it prioritized. And the reason why it has not been able to do so is because of social technology. It borrowed the social technology from rest of the world. Bhutan's banking infrastructure today is no different from India's banking infrastructure. Bhutan's corporate infrastructure is no different from India's corporate infrastructure. So, what this social technology did was that it inherently uh, fostered greed, jealousy, and desire for wealth amongst its population. So, although they were Buddhist and they wanted to avoid these three poisons of mind, which is greed, jealousy, and ignorance, but if they want to engage in the economic system, the rules are such that they have to, follow. Otherwise, there's no way to survive. So, what Bhutan today is facing is not physical invasion, which colonizers had in yesteryears, but they are facing psychological invasion that is coming through media and is coming through social infrastructure. Right? So the country is grappling with its own different problems because of that, but still it is very unique in terms of the environment that it has, because there are no billboards, there are many different rules that still keeps its sanctity intact. But just to give you a fact, almost 10 to 20% of the population last year left Bhutan. So the country is going through a mass exodus. Basically, everybody's moving to Australia to have a better consumerist lifestyle, basically, because they're influenced by media narratives.
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much. That was really, really helpful and inspiring, of course. We'll have to do our own research and design in order to find our solution for this, for sure. But thanks.
Yeah. Like I would say, to I wouldn't say like an answer, but a thought for Elvinara's question would be like the entire part of how we have been conditioned or trained. And another part is like, are you aware of the fact that you are conditioned in the first place? Because so many people aren't aware. So then it starts like from there, like first is awareness, and how you bring about that.
Yeah. And also, for people who are even aware, okay, they feel helpless because the social structures or the rules of trade and commerce and governance are such that even if they are aware, they cannot make different choices. So that is
Then
why the individual approach
welcome.
is so important.
Yeah. Like sometimes, like yes, even if you are aware, even if our mind is cultivated, then there comes an entire role of power in front of us, so which doesn't allow us to do anything sometimes, even if we will do. But I feel it could be the root cause, could be somewhere like the educational systems. Maybe like somewhere that's why in most of my design interventions I try to focus on the education system, or how the root is in the first place.
Yes, I also wanted to ask, as I understood, you prefer to start with the educational sphere, but maybe you like, what do you think from which spheres also this shift in mind can start? I understand that's a lot from the educational. So how our next generation would perceive this idea of happiness, not just stuck into market and economy, but maybe you think as a designers from which spheres we can maybe start except of education to make this mind shift.
Yeah. So it has to happen simultaneously. All these five spheres have to be transformed simultaneously because they're all interlinked and interdependent. Okay. So even when we're talking about education, if we have not organized our knowledge infrastructure properly, then we cannot have right education, right? If we have not transformed our economic system, then even individuals are educated and their minds are cultivated, but they will have to go through the drudgery of the economic system, right? And the most important thing that shapes the mind is the environment. And as designers, we are constantly shaping the environment, right? The houses that we design, the vehicles that we design, whatever we design is shaping our states of being, right? Just do this experiment. Go to maybe if you're in different city, you would be a different person, right? If you are in a monastic environment, you would be a different person. If you're in Auroville, you would be a different person. Automatically the environment shapes you in a certain manner. So in India, there's this saying that as is your company, so is your behavior, or as is your environment, so is your behavior. Right. So, as designers, if not education, then we can start by designing the environments in a mindful manner. And this vibratory matrix is really powerful. What the quantum science now validates, which our ancestors knew very well, is very powerful. If we can create spaces that resonates at higher frequency levels, or the frequency levels that resonates with higher values like love and wisdom and compassion, so that can automatically cause the shift. But if you see most of the cities in the world, we do not have enough infrastructure that resonates at this vibratory matrix. Most of the infrastructures leads us to desires and pleasures and worldly things.
Okay, thank you very much. All of this, as Alice said, is really inspiring.
Thank you, Sneha. It was really good. Maybe
Yeah. Thank you.
the
So,
people joining us are like a part of this project. Like, what are just a question? Like, I'm just curious. Like, what are the roles? Like, how are you guys working on this collectively?
yeah, so maybe they can speak for themselves. We would like to hear them. We have not heard from them, so yeah, it would be good. So, Vinny, maybe you can start.
Yeah, hello all. So I am trying to contribute as much as I can for this cause. And so basically, I'm researching on the model and all the 8 domains, and how we can design a module and a course movie that we can share it to everyone, so that they could get maybe a basic understanding and a basic framework to operate. Because when we are talking about all of these things, I think the very starting should be from the fact that uh, we should have in our mind just a basic framework of how we'll proceed. Because when we talk about the problems and the economic systems around the world, So we know what the problem is, but then the main question is we don't know like from where to start and how to to proceed, and how and what are the steps that we should take so that we could like go into the right direction. So what I am doing is I'm trying to research on these modules and how we can um, create we can say a universal framework which will work for all and which is easy to understand, and which we can distribute to everyone so that they can get a holistic perspective. So yeah.
Yeah, that's nice. Like, just a suggestion, like when we are doing something for a society, I think having this understanding to a 3-year-old child is as important to a 30-year-old man. Like both knowing it is equally important. Sometimes I feel, rather than understanding this when I'm in my 20s or 30s, because it's difficult to change my mind. Like it's very difficult to make a grown up understand because we are so rigid to our thinking and our behaviors.
Yeah, that's a fact about neuroplasticity, no?
Yeah.
We lose the neuroplasticity after a certain age.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah, I'll wait for the material from your side, the detailed one. I'll share with everyone.
Okay.
It was really nice catching up. I will share your email. You can stay in touch, write to her anytime. And
Yeah.
if you want disciplinary designers in the team, we all are here. We're open.
Sure. I mean, I'll send out the reading material, and soon this year. I mean, this is a very deep topic, and I've talked very elaborately about it in the book that's going to be published most probably in August this year. So that would serve as a good starting point to think from an Omni perspective. And I'll share the reading material. And if any of you are interested in being part of any of the 8 domains, or to maybe even all of these 8 domains, and if you want to contribute to our pilot projects in Malaysia, India, and Bhutan, then you're most welcome. You can just simply write to me what interests you, and we'll try to work out maybe something together on how we can synergize our strengths and our interests. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you.
I'll share
you.
the record.
Yeah.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.